Hi guys, I'm Charlie or Charlie Book Fanatic. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to the notorious end of the year book unhaul. I do one unhaul in an entire year and I unhaul so many books I can't even take them with me at once to like donate them or anything. I have to do it in parts because I have so many books I want to unhaul. As soon as I don't like a book, I save it up until the end of the year so I can unhaul it. So this video is probably going to be quite long, so I hope you bear with me and I hope you have fun while watching it. This video will be filmed in two different locations probably. I'm going to unhaul some books from my bookshelves at my place, but I also have a bookshelf at my boyfriend's place and we're also going to unhaul some of our books over there, so I'm probably going to film some more there with the books we're going to unhaul from his place. So if you see a change in location, that is exactly why. The first books I want to show you are books I have kept for nostalgia purposes for so long now, but I finally decided I want to free up some space and just get rid of these because I am never going to reread them and they're just stocking up dust on my shelf and I don't really care anymore. I've been cleaning out my room recently. I'm just throwing everything away that I just always kept for memory's sake and I don't really care anymore. I have the memories in my head. I don't need all of these keepsakes that I'm never even going to look at anymore, and these books are part of that. They're all Dutch books I read when I was a child, and the first one is this series. These are books I used to adore when I was younger. They're about this girl who just gets up to all these different things, gets into relationships, trouble with parents, that kind of stuff, and I think they're really pretty. They have these collages on the cover, but I just don't need them anymore and I am never going to reread them. Same thing goes with this series. It's a Dutch series about two teenagers move to a foreign country with their parents because their parents want to start a camping ground, and that is really what happens in this series. It's a 4-book series and I really loved it back when I read it, but I was so young and I don't even really care anymore. Let's just get rid of it. The next series is this series, and this is not even the complete series. There are so many more books in this series, and I have read all of these, and it's about this girl who grows up throughout the books, gets a boyfriend, struggles with parents, step-parents, that kind of thing, and that's really all it is. I don't think there are any more books coming out in this series. The girl started out as fairly young, I think around like 15 or something, but at this point she's probably a young adult, and the author just kind of stopped writing. They're just going, they've been on my shelves for so long, it's just the same with all of these Dutch books, really. Then a book I got from my boyfriend's grandma. It's called Foreign Fruit by Jojo Moyes. It was a very sweet gift, but it's in Dutch and I don't really care about reading in Dutch. I love reading in English. I am never going to read this book. I will maybe find it as an ebook at some point, but at this point in time, I really do not care about keeping this on my shelf because I'm never going to read it in Dutch. Then another book in Dutch I got from my mom. This one is actually by a Dutch author and it's called Vive la France by Linda van Rijn, and my mom gave this to me along with another book called Eva's Eye. This is Eva's Eye by Karen Fossum. I read this one, I gave it 3 stars. I don't want to keep it. I'm not going to read this one because it is in Dutch and it has never been translated into English, so both of them are going. Then onto the actually English books. First one being Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I have read this and I gave it 3 stars. I actually really liked it. It is a villain origin story for Alice in Wonderland. I thought it was really cool. I don't feel the need to keep it. I only really feel the need to keep books I really enjoyed, and this isn't one of them. Since then, my boyfriend has read it too and he liked it just as much as I did, so he doesn't want to keep it on his shelf either. So I guess it is finally going. Once upon a time I read Elizabeth the Queen by Sally Beadle Smith. This is a biography of Queen Elizabeth, like the reigning Queen Elizabeth, and it is fat as fuck. There are pictures in it and I read the entirety of this thing and it was cool when I read it, but the author turned out to be a huge fan of Queen Elizabeth, so it wasn't entirely unbiased. I didn't really get anything from this. It wasn't as interesting as I imagined it to be. It was mostly the author fangirling over Queen Elizabeth, which felt a little strange to me since I'm Dutch and I don't feel the need to fangirl over Queen Elizabeth. I love historical fiction and just reading historical things, and you will see that in some other books I'm going to unhaul later. And in my past unhauls, but I mostly don't keep these books and I don't really feel the need to have a biography of Queen Elizabeth on my shelf since I'm not a huge fan of her. Oh, I lied. There is another Dutch book, but it's a Dutch translation of an English book on my shelf. It's called Citadel by Kate Moss, and I also got this one from my mom. I've never read it. I don't really care to read it. I think it's a historical fiction, and it's the first book in a series, but again, it's in Dutch. The synopsis didn't sound that interesting to me either, so I am not keeping this one. I'm sorry, Mom, but I don't tend to keep your books. A book popular on BookTube and I read and I felt kind of detached from it is Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuvel. I read the first book in the Themis files and that is all I really wanted to read. It is this book made up out of interviews, and I felt just so detached from it. I didn't care for the characters. It was very scientific to me. I didn't really care, so I don't feel the need to continue on with this trilogy, but I do think the cover is super pretty, but that's not a reason to keep a book. Once upon a time, I felt the need to start a huge sci-fi opera series, and the first book is Leviathan Wakes. It is by James S.A. Corey. Those are two authors, but they use one pen name, I believe. I read this entire thing. It is a huge series. Books are still coming out in this series. It is very soap opera, but I didn't care about the characters. I felt like there was too little character development in comparison with something like The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I love the character development in that one, and that's the kind of space opera I was looking for, but that is not what I got from this. Another popular book on BookTube I was looking at for so long, and I really wanted, and I read and was super disappointed, is The Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This one has gotten praised so many times. It is a book made up out of verse. It is about a boy whose brother got shot, and then he steps into the elevator with a pistol to shoot his brother's killer. And while he's in the elevator going to the ground floor, all of these people who shouldn't be there, like people who are actually dead, step into the elevator and talk to him. I just didn't care. I didn't think the verse was necessary. I felt it was kind of an accessory to the story. Just didn't particularly care about it. Like, it is a very sad story, I know that, but I didn't feel it in my heart, and it just disappointed me so much because I expected more from the verse. It didn't touch me, but I have that most of the times with books written in verse. Poetry does really touch me, but books just written in verse don't really do it for me. So yeah, it's really sad because this is a really pretty book and I really wanted to read it, but it just wasn't for me, sadly. Then I have this biography of Queen Catherine the Grey. I don't know, I read this and it was so boring. I expected something more, but it was super dry. It's also translated from German. It was just super dry, and some of the translation didn't go over entirely well. There's also a lot of name dropping, and some of the names in this were just, I just didn't know. And the author didn't really think about that while writing this. It really didn't go over well with me, even though I really like Queen Catherine the Grey and I wanted to read more about her. This is not the book to pick up for that. I have another related book, and it's Murder of a Medici Princess by Caroline B. Murphy. And I read this and I barely remember anything about it because it's been years and it has been on my shelves ever since. I think just out of pretentious motives, because I didn't really like it. It has been on my classics shelf and it looked real pretty and all, but at this point it is just time to go. I can't keep this on my shelf. I didn't even really like it and barely remember what it is about. In that same vein, like, everything ties together so great, I have two classics I want to get rid of because they look pretty on my shelf, but they are not the matching additions to my Penguin English Library classics, and I didn't particularly enjoy them. The first one is Mary Poppins by P.L. Travers. It is really pretty. I had never read Mary Poppins before or seen the movie, and Mary Poppins is a very weird character, and I like that, but I didn't like it enough to keep it. Then I have a super pretty edition of Peter Pan. Look at it. It is the Puffin Chalk edition, I believe. It is so pretty. I've had this on my shelf for so long, and I think it's the third book in the Peter Pan series. If you didn't know, like, the book actually called Peter Pan is like the third book in the series. I didn't even know it was a series, by the way. I thought it was just one book, but it's not. There are like 3 or 4 books, I believe. I didn't like it. I don't know what I expected. I barely remember watching the Disney movie Peter Pan. I don't think I ever have, actually. And I never read the Peter Pan story, so I wasn't entirely familiar with it. But I expected Wendy and Peter Pan to have some kind of romance, but apparently Peter saw Wendy more like his mom. And that kind of creeped me out, especially since I've read some retellings of Peter Pan, and in those retellings Peter Pan does fall in love with Wendy. So him seeing her as his mom in like the original story creeps me out. So this is going. Book that gives me pain in my heart to get rid of. Never Will Wake by Marisha Pestle. Marisha Pestle is one of my favorite authors because of the book Night Film she wrote. This Hawaii debut, and I did not like it. It has time travel in it, and I do not like the time travel trope in the slightest. But I thought Marisha Pestle could change my mind on that, and she did not. Alas, this book is leaving. Again, I lied. There's another Dutch book here. It is, again, translated from English into Dutch, and I have had this book on my shelves for so long. It is by Danielle Steele, and it's called The Long Way Home. And I loved this book by Danielle Steele. I've had a period in my life where I loved Danielle Steele, but everything I have read by her in recent times I didn't like, so I got rid of all of my Danielle Steele copies, except for this one. I read this one when I was fairly young. It had such a big impact on me because it has such adult themes in it, and since then I kind of just changed my mind, and I don't want to keep this just for nostalgia purposes. Again, I don't read in Dutch anymore, so I am never going to reread this, and I feel like if I am going to reread this, I'm going to be sorely disappointed because it's not going to have the same impact on me like it did back then. I'll just treasure this in my heart, and the actual physical copy can go. Then the book I picked up randomly in the bookstore and read it, and it's about a cult. It's called Foxhole by Eleanor Wasserberg. I've seen it on BookTube before, and it's very pretty. I was like, sure, I wanted to read a book about a cult for a while now, so I picked up this one, and it's not what I expected. It started out very dark, but after that it kind of mellowed out and it was less dark than I wanted it to be, even though it was still very dark in terms of darkness. But this wasn't what I expected from a cult in a book. I just expected more from it. I expected something even darker than this already was. Seeing more of the internal organization of a cult and people running a cult and how that actually works, but I feel like I didn't really get to see that in this. Then I'm going to get rid of this copy of American Blonde by Jennifer Niven. This is the 4-book in the Velvet Jean series, and yes, I have raved about this book and I still love this book very much, but I have another exact same copy of this book, so this one can just go. I ordered 2 copies of this book in the hopes that it was the pretty edition that matches my editions, but alas, I have been disappointed twice already, and this one can go. I don't have to look at 2 disappointments. A book I've been wanting to read for years, was probably the oldest book on my TBR for a while, so I finally read it, is The Lonely Heart Hotel by Heather O'Neill. This is a book about a circus. It's about 2 main characters meet each other when they're orphans and they grow up. They get separated, they grow up, and they eventually encounter each other again. This was very dark. The writing style was very pretty, but it felt very detached. I didn't really care about the characters like I expected to, although I think the writing style was probably the greatest part about this for me. I really enjoyed that writing style, and I'll probably pick up something else by Heather O'Neill if I like the synopsis enough. But aside from that, it wasn't enough to make me keep this book. Those were all of the books I have at my place. So you'll see me back at my boyfriend's place with some books in the next clip. As you can see, there's a location change and I am at my boyfriend's place where I am going to unhaul a few books. My boyfriend was having a hard time unhauling books, but I managed to get him to give up some books so we can unhaul them. It's not like we don't have any space. Well, it does look like we don't have any space from the background here, but most of the shelves on here are still pretty empty, and one of the shelves is entirely dedicated to unhauling books. I feel like it's good to unhaul books you didn't really like at the end of the year, because if you have to do it eventually, when your entire shelves are full, then you have to haul around like 150 books, and I don't know where you're going to get rid of them then. Especially not without a car. The first book I'm going to unhaul here is one I'm not entirely sure I actually want to unhaul. It is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This is the first book in the Six of Crows duology, and it's a spin-off series from Shadow and Bone. I am currently reading the whole Shadow and Bone trilogy, so I'm not entirely sure if I like it enough to try Six of Crows again, because I did try this with my boyfriend and we didn't really get invested or anything. So I'm not entirely sure on that. If I like the Shadow and Bone trilogy enough, then I might want to give this one another try again, and if not, then this is being unhauled. So I thought I would show it in the video, otherwise I kind of feel like I have to save it up for the next end of the year book unhaul, and that is a very long time away. The next book is one we have 2 copies of, and this is kind of a funny story because my boyfriend gifted this one to me for Christmas, I think. He forgot that his parents were also giving this book to us because we asked them for it. So we have 2 copies of this now, and it is Genuine Fraud by E. Lockhart. We read this together because we wanted to, and it was quite a disappointment. We're huge fans of E. Lockhart's We Were Liars, and this one was such a weird read. It definitely stayed with us. It's something we don't want 2 copies of. I think 1 copy is more than enough, and even with 1 copy I'm not entirely sure I want to keep it, but for now I'll keep it. Maybe it will go next year. I will reevaluate my opinion then, but for now it can stay. But we don't need 2 of them. The next book I don't have an opinion on myself, but it is Batman Nightwalker by Marie Lu. I love Marie Lu as an author, but I have no interest in Batman. This is a book my boyfriend has, and he read it and he didn't really like it, so I guess it can go. A book I wanted to unhaul a long time ago, it was Holding Up the Universe by Jennifer Niven. I wanted to unhaul this one, and then I showed my boyfriend the books I wanted to unhaul, and he was like, okay, sure, I'll give this one a try. And he ended up liking it just as much as I did, probably. So, which was not that much. I love Jennifer Niven's All the Bright Places, but this one was just a disappointment, which I have quite a lot with Jennifer Niven's other books, except for All the Bright Places, so that is kind of a disappointment. But this one I got as an ARC once upon a time when it was just coming out, and I didn't end up liking it. My boyfriend didn't really like it either, so it can go now. I still have All the Right Places and I will still treasure that one, but I don't have to have all of Jennifer Niven's other books. Another book we have 2 copies of, Wildcard by Marie Lu. Funny story, I ordered Wildcard for myself, my boyfriend ordered it for us as a gift, and he forgot about it, so I already ordered the book then, and then we had 2 copies. We don't need 2 copies, even though we both really loved Wildcard. And definitely a good follow-up for Warcross. But again, we're going to live together eventually, so 2 copies aren't necessary. The next one is also one I wanted to unhaul a long time ago, and it's History's All You Left Me by Adam Silvera. My boyfriend also wanted to read this one. He liked it just as much as I did, which again, wasn't a whole lot. I don't like Adam Silvera's books, and I don't think I'm ever going to try anything else by him again, so can go. Then a middle grade book, and if you've watched my channel for a while, you know I don't like middle grade a whole lot, and that is Pax by Sarah Pennypacker. This book was just plain boring. I didn't really like the writing style of it. It was written very childish. I did like one of the characters in this, but she wasn't in it for a big part, and the ending of the story was so sad. Like, so sad. I don't know what I expected. It was kind of a predictable ending, but in the end I just was kind of disappointed by it. And again, this proved to me that I don't really want to pick up any other middle grade stories. So it has a very pretty cover, but I don't need it. One of my favorite authors of all time is Ryan Groding. If you've been watching my channel, you know I am not a huge fan of time traveling books. And I always believe that my favorite authors can change my mind on time traveling books, and then they don't. Ryan Groding was an example of that with her book Invictus. I did finish this one, but it was such a weird read. It's quite a thick read as well, and Ryan Groding has disappointed me twice already. Once with The Walled City and now with Invictus. I loved her Wolf by Wolf duology. It's one of my favorite series of all time, but it definitely proves to me that my favorite authors, as I like to call them, they have like a couple books that I like, and I don't like most of the other works they have, so I don't even know who to call my favorite author anymore. But Invictus was such a disappointment to me. My boyfriend read it after I tried to unhaul it, and he DNF'd it, so that proves to me once again that I wasn't wrong on this one either. Probably one of the biggest disappointments ever, Because You Love to Hate Me, written by a whole lot of authors. It's an anthology with prompts by booktubers. This was such a cool idea. My boyfriend and I tried to read it together, but we DNF'd it at some point because the stories didn't feel like villain stories, and they were so weird and boring at some point. Some of them were really good, but most of the stories we rated pretty low for an average rating of like 3 stars. So that wasn't enough for us to keep continuing this, because it felt like quite a torture to get through it. Another book I read with my boyfriend and we skim read was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Race, the first book in the series of the same name. So many people raved about this one, and I wanted to read it with my boyfriend. It sounded like a cool story with photographs and everything. It was such a weird story. We can't get over the fact that Jacob ended up dating his grandfather's ex-girlfriend, who was a little kid, by the way, but you'll get that when you read the story, or if you have read it. We couldn't get over that. It was so weird and creepy, and just the whole story didn't add up for some reason. And we were so close to the ending, but we just couldn't do it, and then we skim read it, and we were still disappointed by the ending, so I think it's safe to say that we're not going to read the rest of the series. Then another book my boyfriend read, but I didn't. He got this book from his grandma, and that is Fool Me Once by Harlan Coben. I can't really say anything about this except for the fact that he thought it was average, so he doesn't really want to keep it. This is written in Dutch, but it's translated from English, and it wasn't really anything he liked, so I guess it can go. But this was my end of the year book unhaul. Let me know down below whether you liked or disliked any of the books I just talked about. On what books do you want to unhaul, or have you unhauled recently? I would love to know. Thanks for watching. Goodbye!